And the idea that we think that life should be completely different, behave differently because we are human beings, animals that supposedly, have the most intelligent brains. Well, I think that that is what you call human privilege. And we need to wrangle human privilege the same way that we're talking about, white privilege and all these other privileges. We human beings are not the event. We are the opportunity.
Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Hello, thank you for joining me. I have a special guest with me. She is a veteran Hollywood actress, author, and CEO of the Inner Fitness Project, a personal development network that teaches individuals to focus more on thriving than surviving. Please help me welcome author of The Little Book of Big Lies and star of OWN's hit dramatic series, Queen Sugar, Miss Tina Lifford. Miss Tina, welcome to the show.
Hey, Cornell, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I must tell you, as a viewer of Queen Sugar, it is in this day of housewives and R&B divas and all of this stuff. And those things are beautiful. It is so refreshing to see an Aunt Vi on the screen. For me, she is a reminder of the strength and the wisdom and the I guess the tenacity of our Black women. Those aunties, it just reminds me of one of my dad's sisters or one of my aunts or something like that. I have to ask you, what were your thoughts on your character Aunt Vi when you initially got the script?
Yeah, it actually was in alignment with what you just said. I grew up in the small town of Evanston, Illinois, and my mother and father's friends were my extended aunties, right? Everybody was an aunt or an uncle. And what has been totally amazing to me since having the opportunity to play Aunt Vi is that I became aware that those women were not represented on television. And that, literally here this archetype is, and she's not a Black archetype, though we certainly in our community love and recognize Aunt Vi. We all know one or, have been loved by one or want one. And yet it wasn't until Oprah Winfrey was in the position of owning OWN, and Ava DuVernay is such the amazing storyteller with her fingers on the pulse of what people really want to lean into, that we got to finally see ourselves the way we all know this woman through Aunt Vi. Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned Oprah, and definitely we have to give a shout out to Ava DuVernay, who is the queen and she so much respect, and there's so much we can say about her, but we honor her gift in film and television. I've got to ask, when it comes to your journey playing Aunt Vi or even finding the character, in my research, I learned that this was an intention of yours to play this kind of role, and not only this kind of role, but with this kind of ensemble. Talk about that power of intention and how it landed you in this place.
Yeah. So, the power of intention is to not be denied. We all should get far more curious about its power. And I will tell you that in two very specific ways, the power of intention has absolutely shaped my deepest desires. When I first started off acting and I didn't know how to get from being an audience member up onto that, 70-foot silver screen, one night after watching a movie, The Big Chill, where it just represented everything I wanted, I went home and in pain, I kept writing, how do I become a respected, sought after working actress? How do I become a respected, sought after working actress? And that evening of yearning just burned into my being a very clear picture of what it was that I wanted. And when you have a clear picture of what it is that you wanted, there are mystical things that happen that help you stay in alignment with that vision as you move through your life. And there's an attractive energy about it, meaning it literally begins to attract opportunities and awarenesses to us. When it came to Queen Sugar, I kid you not, you can find it in my journal. The ask was, how do I, how can I be in a award-winning, critically acclaimed show with a fantastic ensemble that everyone recognizes and still rise and shine in my contribution? Something like that. And certainly when, you never know. When I went on the audition, I literally left the audition thinking, they're not interested, you know? So when I got a telephone call just, hours later, I was like shocked because I literally thought, they're not interested. But that show represents what I wrote in my journal almost to the T.
Wow. You mentioned something, and I want to hone in on that just a little bit, and then we're going to go back to Anvi. But you mentioned going to the audition and saying, they're not interested. And being in Hollywood and me in certain facets of the industry, it can be an industry that really beats you up. And you prepare for this role, you place intentions in your journal, then you go for the big win, and then you're not chosen. How do you stay centered and find still that place of belonging and move on past that, even when you've been rejected?
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't believe in rejection. I'm not at all. What is happening is that pieces are being sorted and the connections that are supposed to happen are happening. That's the first thing. So there are no wasted moments. But in terms of how do I stay buoyant and determined, I'm very clear that my good does not come from the people who say yes to me in the room. My good comes from the work and the intention that I set, and then knowing what my purpose is. And my purpose, above anything else, is to use every single moment to grow me into that next better iteration of myself. And if I am doing that, then I am making myself a clear and open channel for more life to move through me. And if I believe that it is all connected and intentions are real, then that will take care of itself. And it may not be in this particular room, but all of it matters.
That's so good. That's so good. Back to Anvi for a moment. We have to talk Anvi and Hollywood. I mean, many women are looking for love. And Hollywood is different for an Anvi. What do you think it is that joined these two together?
Well, first off, what do you mean when you say Hollywood is different for Aunt Vi?
Well, a woman of Aunt Vi caliber, I mean, Hollywood is a little more aggressive and ambitious in life, and of course younger, maybe a little immature in certain areas, but definitely loves her. I guess looking upon that, you would probably see an Aunt Vi, has this husband who's at home and maybe a retiree. They go on walks together and garden.
Yeah.
So it's a different image than what you probably would see.
Yes, what's exciting about Aunt Vi in Hollywood? Um, there's a couple of paths that I love where they're concerned. Number one is um, Aunt Vi was with the man she was quote unquote supposed to be with, the way we're conditioned and reared. And that man, Jimmy Dale, beat her, right? That man, Jimmy Dale, did not appreciate her. And in following that more traditional conditioned mindset, she actually got disconnected from herself. When she met Hollywood, and this is how I have detailed the backstory for myself. When she met Hollywood, she wasn't trying to be in a relationship, but what she met was the opportunity to laugh. And she hadn't really had that for a while. What she met was the opportunity for her younger self, for her more free self to actually be present in this woman who had already lived half of her life, but hadn't really lived any of it. So what she met was a place where she could be herself. And then she discovered that there was love in that.
I like that. I like that. I like that. You mentioned her losing herself, but I have to go here for a moment because we see that common thread sometimes in men of the generation of Aunt Vi's first love. We see that they are great providers, great when it comes to the image of the family, but behind closed doors, they're violent and sometimes tormented.
Burdened.
What is it? Burden, yes, burden. What is it about men, particularly Black men, in those positions? What have we missed or are not getting from your vantage point?
Yeah, well, and it's not just Black men, it's all of us. But men and then Black men have not been given the permission that women and now Black women are having to explore themselves. But so much of the emotional burden, baggage, hurt, I call it hurts, traumas, upsets, and disappointments. So much of what people are carrying, they feel the weight of it, but they don't really know what it is and why it is. And so therefore you feel damaged and broken and stuck. So, with Jimmy Dale or let's say Black men in general, I can speak to my father. My father loved my mother. He's deceased now. My father loved my mother. But over the years, my father became more oppressive. His jealousy and rage intensified. And he literally, towards the end of their 49 years together, he became abusive. Why? Well, none of us knew until he was 70 something sitting on my couch. And he tells me a story about his childhood and seeing his mother, walking on his mother, having sex with someone who wasn't his father. And she didn't see him. He saw her. He never mentioned it to anyone. But what he said to me on my couch was, that picture has run through my mind every day since it occurred. So when we have hurts, traumas, upsets, and disappointments, they don't have to be as big as that. They can just be little hurts. They can be the hurt of, reaching for a parent or someone and feeling rejected. The hurt isn't about the size. The hurt is about the degree to which it disrupts our sense of ourselves and truth.
Mm.
And when that gets incubated and it begins to fester like a sore, until you can literally address it, clean out the wound, it can't heal. So whether it is Black men or just people in general, that's how our nervous systems work. And we are very sensitive beings. And as sensitive beings, we absolutely can encounter the kind of pain that both Aunt Vi and Jimmy Dale encountered without tools to manage it. And so they both, in their own ways, are stuck in moments in their past that now have robbed them of life and shaped their whole story. Thank God for Hollywood, because Hollywood and Vi's love for Ernest, her brother, helped her to hang on to. And then in season 4 and going into season 5, you get to see how she just continues to bloom in her right to be herself and in connection with a man, a human being, a friend that she can trust.
So good. I have to ask, and you just unveiled something personal as it pertains to your father. Once he revealed that information to you, what was your perception? How did you receive and process that in order to not make him feel guilty for what he did to your mom, but to, I guess, help him heal from his trauma?
Yeah. So, I love my daddy. And I had one of the best daddies on the planet, regardless of how he showed up with my mom. And because I am just since I was a young girl interested in our human condition, I sat there and felt the honor of God to be able to be a place where this man at 76 could finally say what had never been said. So I listened and I loved him. And the challenge with healing is that we all have to choose to do it. Nobody else can step in and have enough compassion and understanding that's going to heal you for you. You still have to do it yourself. And my father, like so many people, was stuck in a conditioning that allowed him that moment of awareness, but he didn't know how to take that into a next step. He wouldn't go to therapy. He had opinions around therapy, but he saw it. His eyes opened, and then he chose to not go further. And I think that probably Jimmy Dale is someone who chose to not go forward. And you will see that Hollywood is definitely not that person. You get that sense in general, but in season 5, you see that Hollywood is not driven by the conditioning, that old school conditioning of what a man is.
Can't wait. We have to talk about your book, The Little Book of Big Lies. And you're quoted as saying every single page of this book is meant to expand and heal. How so?
Yeah. Well, I didn't write it because I wanted to be an author. I wrote it because it wouldn't leave me alone. And I wrote it because for years I had struggled with and asked the question, how is it that I can be so confident and capable in so many areas and then have breakdown in these other areas. And I know I'm not a fraud. So what is that? And my curiosity, my drive to understand our humanness, my relentless trust and faith that indeed there is a, higher intelligence, and that we are meant to innately experience interior homeostasis, the internal homeostasis, the same way that the body has this innate ability to heal, scratches and wounds. And I just kept leaning into that. And what I have found that not just transforms my life, but gives me ever-growing freedom, I wanted everyone to know. And so I started down the road of trying to put it on paper because it just kept nudging me to do so. And the entire time I kept saying, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. But the desire for people to know that there was so much more power inside of them, and so much more that we can do inside of ourselves to design and create lives that work. I just had to keep going. And the fact that people are telling me that this book has changed their lives, that is the reason I did it. But I didn't know that until, I was, until I surrendered and did what was pushing me to be done.
It has indeed helped so many people. And I think one of those stories, and I want you to share a little bit about that, is the editor that got a hold of your book when it was self-published, when you did it all by yourself, and was impacted in just 1 week. And so much so that he offered you a deal and repackaged and published the books under his publishing company. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, that editor, and bless him, that is Patrick Bassett. He is an amazing human being, Patrick Bass, I say. And he's over at HarperCollins, and he used to be with Essence. He was, I forget, he was a muckety muck over at Essence magazine. And Patrick Bass is friends with a woman by the name of Sean Robinson, yes. And Sean attended a event that I had over at Soho House. And I didn't know Sean, but at the time, I invited 10 influencers in. And at the end of our inner fitness conversation, I gave them a copy of the self-published book. Unbeknownst to me, and that's usually the way it works, right? Unbeknownst to me, Sean Robinson was going through something. And she had actually almost not shown up. In fact, she was quite late in showing up. But she clearly went home and started reading that book. And that book clearly impacted her, because she called her friend, Patrick Bass, who was now over at HarperCollins. Patrick was going through something. Patrick read the book, and within a very short period of time, there was an email in my email account talking about the book and wanting to meet with me. And we now have, the Little Book of Big Lies was released in 2019. Earlier this month, it was on the Forbes list of the 21 best books to read to make your 2021 the best year ever. And we have another book that will be coming out next year or late next year, I believe.
Wow, so amazing. In light of the little book of big lies, what is one of the big lies you've told yourself through your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So that some pain lasts forever. And that is such a big lie that tortures so many people. You know, you find yourself dealing with something, and for me, there were two lies. For me, I had coming up a real struggle with my brother's drug addiction, and I felt protective of my brother, and I felt that back then my brother just wasn't dealt, a fair hand, and that his sensitivity was greater than this tough competitive world made room for. And it burdened me. And it burdened me in really, really impactful ways. And that was something that I had tried to get some distance from over and over, years, decades. I had tried to get distance from my over responsibility where my brother was concerned. And when I started to do the work that I now recognize as inner fitness, it wasn't until that journey that lie that some things last forever started to break up. And in the breaking up of that lie, I was given, we all are, when we realize that we have been carrying lies and then we challenge just one of those lies. When we get results with just that one lie, it emboldens us and gives us the courage necessary to then go after those deeper lies that we don't even challenge anymore because we've lived with it for such a long time.
So good. You mentioned inner fitness, and you're the CEO of the Inner Fitness Project. We know what physical fitness look like. It's this size, this height, this weight, this body mass index. What does inner fitness look like? Yeah. How does it show up in the world?
Yeah. So inner fitness, I define it as building the mental, emotional, and spiritual skills and practices that foster resilience, resolve unresolved issues, and relieve stress so that we literally can thrive more than just being on that treadmill trying to survive. And what it looks like is literally being able to have a greater sense of self-agency and power when you are confronted with those challenges, those recurring challenges and patterns that you have not up until now been able to unravel in your life. It looks like being able to know what to do inside of yourself when you find yourself caught in the quicksand of worry, doubt, and fear, or hurts, dramas, traumas, upsets, and disappointments, and literally know what to do to help bring yourself out of that quicksand and shift yourself into the part of your being and thinking that actually is responsible for thriving. The brain has different functions. And in the little book of Big Lies, we talk about there being the surviving self. That's just my frame that I give you to help you see. But if you look, you will see that there's a surviving self, a thriving self, and an infinite self. And we are most of us are really familiar with the surviving self. It operates in worry, doubt, and fear. Everything can be going good in your life, and you'll still go and focus on the thing that isn't working, the thing that has you frightened or has you feeling small and not good enough. The surviving self wants to keep us small, because that way we will stay safe. We will stay safe in our familiar hell, the The thriving self, you also know this part. The thriving self, you, every single time you have been successful, every single time you have experienced the possibility and then reached for and actually achieved something greater than you even thought was possible, what was present was hope and possibility and curiosity and a willingness to keep moving forward, turning problems into growth. That is the thriving self. And the infinite self is just being connected to God, to whether you call it God or that infinite intelligence, but that part of us that has been and will always be life itself. You know, water can be frozen, it can be snow, it can be dew, it can be precipitate, it can be all kinds of things, but the essence is the same. Well, there's a part of us that isn't just locked into this moment today and this body as we know ourselves. It's connected to all that is. And when we know that, we have access to that intelligence. And so our job is to begin to recognize that we have, for very good reasons, you know, been working with a nervous system that has been in the making through survival reactions for 500 million years. So for us to understand that the way in which we react up until now absolutely makes sense when you understand the surviving self. But every time you have been successful, every time you have known joy, it's because of the thriving self. And so our opportunity is to take the thriving self and the infinite self and begin to work consciously, get informed, and then work intentionally so that we can manage this default behavior that is connected to the surviving self and become more and more deliberate and powerful in our, balancing and navigating life.
Mhm. You talk about taking problems and turning them into growth opportunities. Talk about that within the construct of what we're seeing. We are all dealing with the same problem as it pertains to this global pandemic. How do we take this huge problem that is really out of our control and create an opportunity for growth?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I'm going to start with what is truly the obvious, but we need to wake up and acknowledge it. Pandemics have been happening since 3000 BC. So this is not happening to us. We are on a planet in an experience of life. We have had the opportunity to be here as human beings, but life continues to do what life does. Pandemics, fires, the things that we human beings call, catastrophe and tragedies are the way in which life itself has expanded since the beginning. So let's understand that there's a process that life is always engaged in, and we can't take that process personally. What we can do is to begin to understand our own arrogance and ego. And the idea that we think that life should be completely different, behave differently because we are human beings, animals that supposedly, have the most intelligent brains. Well, I think that is what you call human privilege. And we need to wrangle human privilege the same way that we're talking about, white privilege and all these other privileges. We human beings are not the event. We are the opportunity. We have the gift. And so when we understand that, then we begin to work with life in a way that lets us not just, honor the fact that we are here, but when it comes to our lives, we get, no matter what the challenge is, we get to make a choice. And the choice is, do I respond to this in a way that grows me, or do I respond to this in a way where I become a victim? And yes, there are challenging things that happen in life. Yes, there are devastating things that happen in life. But our experiences do not have to become our life sentences, nor do they have to define us in ways that leave us small and broken. That is up to us.
Mm. It's no secret that fitness is a daily practice, a routine. Many would wonder, what is your daily routine for inner fitness? What does Tina do to stay centered?
Yeah. Well, I tell people all the time that you are looking at and talking to someone who's very practiced. This stuff is real to me. And so I have been pouring intentional time into myself since I was in my teens, quite honestly, right? So that that effort has become my way of life. And what that means in terms of how I go through my life, I mean, yes, I meet with challenges, but I meet with challenges knowing that when they're there, number one, I'm not going to take this personally. Number two, I'm going to become curious, because if it's disturbing my peace, then there is something in it for me to learn. And if I learn that, then I expand. So then I'm going to be about, okay, how do I use this to grow? And that doesn't mean that it's always comfortable. But what is comforting is that I know where I am, and I have tools, and I have a purpose. And those two things give me a sense of not just purpose, but even oddly adventure, because it's about me using this lifetime to the best degree that I can to experience life. And I trust in the intelligence of things. So I always get curious. I tell myself the truth. I do inner fitness workouts. I literally believe that we can train our inner fitness the way we train physical fitness. Physical fitness, you do physical exercises. At the Inner Fitness Project, we 1 hour at a time engage in internal exercises, internal practices. And one of our very effective prompts is, if I tell myself the truth, because we can do anything when we align with ourselves. And the worst and most devastating experience will lessen and then give us lessons if we are willing to be with ourselves honestly. And that means don't deny where you are. Don't avoid where you are. Don't run from yourself. So many people are running from their self. People are afraid of themselves. They're afraid of being at home alone in their own mind. And I get it, because the mind can be torturous. But if you learn to tell yourself the truth, tell yourself the truth about who you are, tell yourself the truth about what you're capable of. That's on the good side and the side where you need to grow. If we learn to be with ourselves in a way that allows us to really catch sight of all that lives inside of us, we will be buoyant, and we will use that information intentionally and for moving us to that next better iteration of ourselves.
Wow. As we prepare to wrap, I have to say I'm always delighted and honored to be in the position that I'm in, to be able to talk to thought leaders and great thinkers like yourself. And the beautiful thing about it is every now and then I get a chance to insert a question that I'm curious about. You talked about when you were writing your book earlier that you felt the nudge. And obviously you had no idea that the book would grow and become what it was and would bless so many people. How do you surrender to the nudge? You feel it, you know it's there, but how do you surrender, not knowing if you're on the right path, not knowing if it's the right thing to do? How do you surrender wholly to that nudge and just allow it to take you?
The answer is so simple. You just keep going. I could have stopped, and I did. I threw my hands up more than once and said, I can't do this. But then I kept going because the nudge was still present. And I will tell you that, you know, there's so much that just this conversation that you and I are having, we are able to have this conversation because I kept going. And because I kept going, even though I didn't want to, even though it made no sense to me, even though I literally said, why am I doing this? You know, afraid that I was wasting time, afraid that I was going to feel foolish and embarrassed for having, you know, poured all of this time and attention and energy into this thing, right? And then come up short. But I kept going. And that's how I felt about, you know, acting. I just kept going, not because I had something to prove, but because something wouldn't let me stop. And so we just have to keep saying yes. And we have to find a way to say yes in the midst of our doubts and in the midst of the other things we feel we have to do in order to survive. You just have to keep saying yes to the thing that is pressing upon you, because there is a reason. If this whole thing is connected and, you know, life expresses through things. You look out, I'm looking out my window and I can see, you know, the millions of ways that life is expressing through things. So if you stop, then you literally are stopping that flow of life that for whatever the reason has chosen you as a place, as a pathway to wherever it's going. And if you don't say yes to that, then you don't get to see what life was trying to do through you. And that's in relationships. That's in career. That's in your deepest, darkest secret, you know, and pain that is telling you, there's the one side that is telling you to give up and just let this be. But there's that other, that thriving part that is saying, no, you just have to get up again. You just have to get up again. Listen, we are meant to thrive. And we can only do that if we learn the skills, and this is what we do at the workouts, if we learn the skills to not be distracted by the ignorance and the discomfort that is likely going to rise up in your life when life is trying to use you for a purpose greater than you know.
Miss Tina Lifford, everybody. Mic drop right there. Listen, the author of the little book of Big Lies and star of OWN's hit dramatic series, Queen Sugar. Before we go, Miss Tina, what excites you most about Aunt Vi in this season 5?
Ooh, y'all. It's not just Aunt Vi. Here's what Ava DuVernay did. Ava DuVernay, we started shooting season 5 in March of 2020. We got 1 episode in the can. Pandemic hit. We were down for 6-7 months. What Ava had the entire season already written. Her and our showrunner, Anthony Sparks. And then in that 6 months, with everything that was going on, they rewrote season 5. And every single thing that we as citizens of the world were experiencing is experienced in season 5. From the pandemic to people catching COVID to deaths and without the ability to be with your loved ones and funerals to losing money and businesses closing, just everything that we Americans and citizens of the world have been going through for the last year because of COVID-19.
So good, so good. Miss Tina, I love your spirit. Your soul is rich. Thank you for your contribution to us, not only in the series Queen Sugar, but just to life and being who you are. Thank you for doing the work on yourself to be able to bless us.
Thank you so much, Cornell.
Again, Queen Sugar on OWN Network. Listen, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining me, Miss Tina. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Cornell. Be well.
Well, this has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.